Welcome to this episode of the Talk Diaries, episode number 8, in which we want to talk about the direction of travel for the US economy. Of course, there has been a lot of talk about the impact of the tariffs that have been introduced by the President, Donald Trump, whether they will stoke inflation and whether indeed we will see a slowdown of the growth of the US economy. Even I have seen some predictions of a recession. We've just seen a flare-up of trade tensions once again between the US and China, and we'll go into why that's important in a moment. With Enrique Escalante, welcome to you, assistant professor at Angelo State University and Texas State University of Economics. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Tanya. It's a pleasure to be here. Actually, it's Texas Tech University.
Texas Tech University, my apologies.
Thank
Okay, so let's get on to the meat of the matter. We have seen a flare-up once again of tensions between the US and China. You know, China is not taking it lying down, is it? And they're in a rather intractable situation because China has control largely of rare earths, and the US has a chip manufacturer, NVIDIA, and China wants to get access to those chips. So they're really locked in a very difficult battle here, and Trump doesn't seem to have a weak stomach here. In fact, he has a very strong stomach. How is this going to play out, and how are these trade battles that Trump started affecting the US economy?
Well, the first thing that I think we need to emphasize is that a trade war between China and the United States will probably have no winners. It is making us poorer globally than what we should be. And what happens with the United States also is that even if we need probably a strategy to deal with China, it has to have some economic coherence. And this one does not have one. At some point, some people in the administration complain that China is floating the global markets with very cheap products, cars and machines and goods. But at the same time, we complain that they impose controls on the rare earths minerals that they have. So that is not very coherent, right? Is it like China actually is damaging the US economy by providing goods with lower prices, and at the same time is damaging the US economy by not providing rare earth minerals? If the idea is that we are going to have a better economy by impeding China to provide us with goods with lower prices so that we can stimulate domestic production, it would be the same logic with the rare earth minerals, that they just decided not to export or discourage the exportation of those minerals, right? So we would probably just encourage the domestic production of these rare minerals in the United States, if that would be the logic. So which one is it? There is not really a direction in which this would make sense.
Well, at the heart of it, Trump is saying, look, China sells us more than we sell them, and we don't think that's fair. And the fact is, you could argue that it's easier for US manufacturers to step in and produce some things, but rare earths is not one of them, because it goes back to where you get this stuff from, and China controls a lot of it. So really it's guided more by politics than anything else, isn't it?
Well, it's a good point that you mentioned the trade deficit, because the best way to think about the trade deficit is indeed not to think about it. It's just like it doesn't make sense. You actually have, when you talk to the people and then they notice, whenever there is inflation, you can feel it. Actually, prices are going up. When there is unemployment, people not able to find jobs. When there is a trade deficit, people do not really notice that. Right? We keep trade deficit with several countries. We keep trade deficit at individual levels, with the supermarket, with grocery stores, with anybody that provides you a service, and you are not really thinking like, oh wait, I need to sell something to the supermarket, to this store, so that I can balance the trade that I have with them. So it's the same with the countries. We don't really need to achieve an equal amount of goods and services that we sell to another country and have the same level of balance that they would sell to us, right? So I don't think this idea of the trade deficit in the United States, it's a good starting point to design the policy with international trade.
No, but at the heart of it lies politics, does it not? Whereby Donald Trump is saying, look, we should be producing more of this stuff in America. We should revive our manufacturing sector, and we should not be buying this stuff from China. So one could argue it's more politics that lie at the center of it rather than coherent economics.
Um, you could argue that that's the case, but I'm not even sure what is actually the purpose that we want, right? So in the case of China, it's probably the only case in which we can say, well, maybe there are valid reasons to establish some controls to the trade with China because we don't want to also, if there is a race on artificial intelligence and we really need these rare earth minerals to win this race, indeed I would prefer um, a decent democracy or sort of decent democracy like the United States to win that race rather than a dictatorship like in China. And so there is a space for an argument, a valid argument to establish and discourage maybe or decoupling from China so that we can have a more independent production. Um, but as I say, I don't think many of these strategies make sense. Yes, it is true that we could benefit maybe from having a more independent domestic production of rare earth minerals. Um, but at the same time, I don't know if the path to that is trying to start a trade war with China that is going to make us poorer, right?
Yeah. So
I don't
you're
think.
sort of saying that there is an argument which underpins it, but the way that Trump is going about it is probably is the tail wagging the dog a little bit. Really, what you want to do is start production of these things, encourage production, and that will in turn rebalance the deficit.
Yeah, I don't think it's a good idea to impose taxes on Americans, right? That's the plain way to put it. Because tariffs are taxes on Americans, it just increase prices. I don't think it will just encourage domestic production. I think that responds to different aspects there.
Right, but what Trump is saying is, look, if we impose tariffs, we get money in for the government, and that money presumably can be used maybe to pay down some of the huge pile of debt that America's carrying at the moment. And
Yeah.
that helps the economy in some way. It's not a zero-sum game in that way. But the problem is, and this is what you've pointed to, is there is a conflict here because the minute you impose tariffs, that discourages imports, and the money you get from the tariffs presumably then evaporates, does it?
Yeah, I mean, it's also another contradiction that they have there because when they are encouraging um, tariffs so that they can increase the revenue, well, if they have revenue, it means that the products are still entering the country, and if they are still entering the country, they are still competing with the domestic production here. So again, which one is it, right? Because if we are going to raise tariffs with the purpose of impeding or discouraging the importation of some products within the United States, and if these are effective, then we shouldn't have many of these goods entering the country. But if we indeed obtain some revenue, it means that they keep entering the country. So I don't know what is the goal that we're trying to achieve. We try to discourage the importation or we try to increase revenue. It cannot be both. And we increase revenue from taxes, as it seems that is what happened recently. Um, it's also ironic that we are discussing that one part of that will go to bail out some of the farmers that have been affected by some retaliation from China.
Hmm.
There is again another contradiction there because the government started a problem, created a problem out of nothing, and now to solve that problem, we're gonna probably create another one, which
So when
is
you talk about the farmers, are you talking about soybeans?
yes, that's right. Yeah, soybean
Right.
farmers.
So that China is imposing restrictions on the import of American soybeans, and
Yeah.
this is affecting farmers in the US. So that's one way in which farmers, I mean, are we seeing evidence that farmers are already being affected by that? Are we seeing inflation coming into the US economy as a result of these taxes, tariffs, as you describe them?
Well, I think the farmers are affected because they just cannot sell their products overseas, abroad, specifically China. In that way, they are affected. Now, if the whole economy has been affected by tariffs, um, that is still hard to say. I don't think some of the models that initially predicted that tariffs were going to trigger uh, greater rates of inflation, I don't think they are, or they were very accurate. Most of these models also consider potential retaliation from other countries, and that didn't happen. So many of the countries decided not to scale the problem with the Trump administration. Also, the tariffs at the end in practice, they have been lower than what it was expected initially on April, right? And some of them have not been applied. So the whole economy, the war economy, has been able to accommodate and deal with this sort of uncertainty. So I guess most of the problem that comes from tariffs is the uncertainty that is creating, because at this point we don't really know what are ultimately the tariffs with China and with other countries, right?
So it's very difficult for business to have any kind of strategy in that environment. That's the problem.
And I think that is the main problem. Yes, for this for any investment, what you want is some degree of certainty. If you don't have that, then what is happening is that you are slowing down the process of growth, because we are very careful on investing in some specific sectors. Nonetheless, I think the economy has shown signs that it's been able to strengthen their foundations despite this uncertainty.
So, if there is this uncertainty and this prospect of inflation, which, as you say, doesn't appear to be yet, we're not quite seeing it. There could be a number of reasons for that. I suppose it might be that, companies worked up their inventories before tariffs and they're working them down. I suppose there's room for it to come in yet. What is the net effect on all of this uncertainty that Trump has created, do you think? Do you think it will discourage, for example, foreign investors into the US?
Maybe over the short run, it is discouraging that a little bit. Also, I think there are some forces in the market that may be going in the opposite direction, because we have what seems to be also a change in the productivity, which is artificial intelligence. Some people believe that that would actually increase our productivity, and it's time to invest on that. The stock market has been doing well, though it remains very sensitive to Trump's decisions on trade and tariffs. So I think over the short run, there are some concerns: tariffs, immigration, trade, some foreign policy. But over the long run, the U.S. economy is still very sound and solid, right? The other day, I was also looking at the level of income, individual income, the individual median income, and the household median income in the United States, and it has grown by between 30 and 50% compared to the 1980s and 1970s. We are just way richer than what we were a few years ago. So we are still on a trend of growth, because the foundations that are friendly to investment in the United States are still very strong, right? It's just amazing the amount of money that you can get for any investment about artificial intelligence in the US. It's super quick. It's different companies and people investing on this. So you come up with an idea, you really can get a lot of funding pretty quick in the United States, and that doesn't happen anywhere else. And I think that will continue happening despite these policies of the Trump administration.
So really, the economy is holding firm despite Trump, not because of him, you think, possibly? Would that be fair?
Uh, I think so, but I wouldn't say that this is particular to Donald Trump. I think um, there are some aspects on the economy that I think it is still having good spirit. I think there is this idea of trying to prevent more spending. It has not been very successful either, but I kind of appreciate at least the attempt to try to change the spending patterns in the U.S. government, right? It is true that most of the sectors where President Trump engaged, they don't do that well, and those are specifically trade and immigration. I think the sectors probably where he doesn't pay too much attention are doing much better. So I think that those are the reasons, yeah, that will
So
change.
the other main leg, I think it's fair to say, of what we're seeing in terms of his approach to the future direction of America is this issue of immigration. Now, obviously, there's the question of the border. Let's set that aside for one moment. But if you talk to people in America, Vermont, for example, I was talking to somebody recently, and they're talking about raids on farms of workers who the underlying assumption is that they would be undocumented. Now, anybody who's lived in the United States, as I did, for 3 years, will understand that what they observe is that there is a high prevalence of undocumented workers, and they really make the economy work at some level. So if you create this atmosphere, or if you conduct these raids, what does that do? How does that unbalance the economy?
Well, I think in general that's another problem where another situation in which we can appreciate there is a contradiction in the administration. If we want to encourage some domestic production, that depends a lot on the on having labor that is accessible at a low price, and that is facilitated by the many immigrants. If you remove this labor force out of the market, it makes sense that some industries wouldn't be able to persist because they actually depend on having labor that is available at a low price and that comes with low skilled workers, right? So even the Trump administration, I think, has been recognizing that it's probably going too far in trying to remove some of these workers out of these industries. The only reason why these industries exist is because they can access this type of labor. If they would have to hire American workers, they would have to pay higher salaries, and if that's the case, then they wouldn't be able to provide the services that they provide, the services and goods that they provide. I'm talking about specifically some sectors like tourism and probably also agricultural sector. They depend a lot on this, on having this labor force. So on the other hand, also there are some things that I don't know how to understand those when we discourage workers that are that have higher skills, like H-1B workers within the United States. Why is it that we're doing that and at the same time we're trying to win a race with artificial intelligence? The ultimate resource, it's always people, right? It's ideas what actually drives growth. So and ideas come just from having people working in the United States that can come up with their skills and they can create and innovate. If we give up on trying to attract this human capital into the country, there is no regulation or tariffs that are gonna make us win this race against China and other competitors when it comes to artificial intelligence.
But again, I would come back to saying, is this not simply politically driven? And political goals don't necessarily always align with economic goals, right? And the other thing that we're seeing is, and we're noticing this in the UK as well, as there is this shift to the right at one end of the political spectrum, which is becoming more entrenched, more dogmatic with these political goals, we're also seeing a resurgence of the left and the argument of the left. And one possibility here is that America gets to the stage where it's confronted by either one extreme or another in terms of politics, which don't actually really build a thriving economy. Are we at the end of this era of saying, well, globalization is a good thing, and simply we move into an era of politics? What would a Democrat government do at this point if it came into power? It wouldn't go back, presumably, to the status quo, would it?
Well, yeah, that is one of the points that are very concerning on the with American politics, in the sense that if you really want to oppose ideas to the Trump administration, then you will have to advocate for economic freedom, right? You will have to advocate for having a more an open society, and that also means having an open economy, maybe with less regulations, maybe welcoming free trade, maybe strengthening property rights, and I don't think the Democrats have been able yet to accept that is the opposing force and opposing arguments to Donald Trump. I am concerned that they may double down economically and they may just go more to the left in terms of economic analysis and keep their more progressive positions in politics. What is concerning, as you were saying also, is that the economic results may be subject to the political criteria. And if that is the case,
What do you
then
mean by
we
that?
are.
What do you mean by that? Could you just unravel that?
Yeah, well, what may happen is that if the US government is going to keep deciding on who are the winners and the losers in the market, then you discourage all these innovators and entrepreneurs to think about how to best serve the consumers. And they start thinking about how to better please the senators, the presidents, the administration. So the competition moves away from the economic market to the political sector. And that is not a productive competition. What is going to happen is that we're going to have a lot of waste on the resources that we spend trying to get these benefits from the government. And that's one of the main problems of engaging in lobby and engaging in all these benefits that we can extract from the federal government is all the resources that we just devote to obtain these benefits. So the economy will just get slower, not very creative. Some groups will capture some sectors, and the U.S. administration, the U.S. government may just become a partner of many of these industries, and that is something that we are seeing, right? Right now, it's very concerning the direction in which the administration is going, in which is investing strongly in some specific sectors and choosing some specific companies that they're going to support. Right? So companies do not remain private anymore. They are part of the U.S. economy or the U.S. market, or
So
the
to
U.S.
stop you there, an
administration.
example would be that Trump's, investment in Intel, the government investment in
That is
Intel.
one of the
Blatant.
that
That's
is
the most
one
blatant, isn't
example.
it?
That is one example, but
Yeah,
it's
or
actually
cryptocurrencies and that. So it's not really even sectors, it's almost specific companies, is it?
yes, and that is what is not productive and concerning. Right? Because what is driving innovation is the competition of many of these forces in the market. Right? Many of these companies are competing to better serve consumers, to increase their profits. But if they find that the one more effective way in which they can increase profits is by pleasing politicians and decision makers and policy makers, then the competition is going to stagnate in the economic sector. It will just be a competition in the political sector. And I don't want to say that it's just happening with Trump. Unfortunately, it is something that has been coexisting still with the U.S. politics, but now it has become more evident, and I think it even has the sympathy of some political base in which they see, yeah, it makes sense the administration will support American companies and decide which ones are the ones that are going to prevail in the market.
Hmm. Is it possible, though, if we take a broader view, that actually the age of globalization is just really, at the very least, taking a pause, that it's over, that people are not convinced um, that it will continue to provide benefits? It provided a fair amount of low inflation and economic growth that wasn't evenly distributed, many people felt, and really people have lost faith in it. And that there's no point in bemoaning its demise. We have to accept that politics has taken over.
Um, well, I hope
It's a
not.
bit of a philosophical question, and maybe
Yeah.
not one for an economist. I don't know.
Oh well, no. I think an economist should be equipped to answer all those questions too, or at least entertain them. And what I think is that yes, it is concerning that we may be on a trend, on a global trend in which the principles of liberalism are in reverse, are going back, and then people are becoming more secluded and they resist interactions with other people. Just going to make us poorer. But one of the ways in which people and economists, I think, need to engage in that conversation is by showing that what happened is that countries and peoples became rich because they had access to a different cultural universe by integrating and incorporating immigrants and by trading with other partners. That's actually what made us richer. And those places that are more secluded, that close their doors, that isolate from the global economy, they have always been the poorer countries and in any economic contest. So unfortunately, and that probably takes us back to the situation in the politics in the United States. I don't think the opposition to Donald Trump has discussed what are the arguments that they're going to oppose to Donald Trump. Right? Seems to be still clueless about how they're going to change their speech and rhetoric. What is it that we're going to provide and put on the table to discuss and offer to the American people? What would make sense to me, and what is I think is a more solid argument against the Trump administration, is that one: liberalism, trade, liberty, progress, economic growth, right? Competition, engaging in business, economic freedom. But I don't think the Democrats are still ready to accept that that is what we should use.
Enrique Escalante, thank you very much indeed for joining me on the Talk Diaries.
Well, thank you very much, Tanya. It has been a pleasure talking to you.